Invest in your people because they're the ones that are going to develop your product. People that are emotionally involved in your process and your product, and they feel a little bit of the ownership themselves.
You're listening to Stories from the Top, an inside guide to better business development. We are here with Coach Dick Vermeil, the NFL Super Bowl champion and founder of Vermeil Wines. How do you like to describe your business and what's your role in the company?
Well, I'm a 15% owner. I'm the originator of the company because it was my hobby. You know, I was born and raised in Calistoga, the north end of the Napa Valley, and I grew up drinking my grandfather Vermeil's homemade wine and grew up helping him make wine. And we were closely connected with the Frediani Vineyard, which today is a 170-acre vineyard right there in Calistoga. My great-grandfather on the Italian side of my family owned a portion of it a long time ago. We still pick that portion of the vineyard. Of course, they're newer vines. But so I had the interest, and I got going, was making a little money, and I said, you know, Archie said, I'd like to take the Vermeil name and put it on a wine bottle because it was so important to my family, the wine and all that kind of stuff. And being close to the Frediani Vineyard family, a son-in-law had a little small winery on Spring Mountain in St. Helena, and he said he'd be glad to make the wine, and instead of putting his label on it, he would put Vermeil Wine Cabernet. Okay, so he started out as a hobby. He paid all the expenses. I paid nothing. And we made about 150, 200 cases, and that happened to be the first release was 1999, the year we won the Super Bowl. So it sold pretty well, and he said, well, let's keep doing it. I said, great. And it was his business, and he's making his other wines, okay, On the Edge Winery. And it was, you know, he was selling it, and then pretty quick, some partners with some real money came in and said, Coach, let's take your connections and turn it into a business. So as we moved on, we bought out the little winery and labeled it all Vermeil Wines, and now all of a sudden we have 2,000 cases of wine, you know. In 2008, it became Vermeil Wines completely because we are now making wines of our own that weren't already barreled on the Edge label. And from 2008 on, we've been making anywhere from this last year, 1,800 cases to as much as 2,700 cases, depending on the crop. And we did it that way, okay? We turned it into the business in 2008, and it's been a struggle. It took us 13 years to get where it covers all the expenses and we have some money in the bank, which is a good feeling. No more capital calls and those kind of things. The club has grown to about 475 wine club members, 135 and 140 right here in Philadelphia. And we make very high-end, quality, expensive wine. Our winemaker consultant is Thomas Brown, who is one of the leading wine consultants and winemakers in the United States, and especially so in the Napa Valley, has produced many 100-rated wines himself, and he has his own label, Rivers Marie. The winemaker that works with him is Andy Jones, and the wine is made at Meadowwood Winery. Okay, we don't own our own winery. We don't own our own vineyards. So what we own is a label and the process and a tasting room on 1018 First Street in Napa, which there are some people from Philadelphia going in there today. Okay, people call me, so I set them up and send them in for a tasting. But it's been a long haul. It's been a long, slow, and people have told me in the past it takes 12 years to break even in the wine business. It took us 13. But we're not in it, you know, making like the small amount of wine that we make in terms of number of cases. It was never meant to be a big money deal, especially with me. It was a hobby, an interest, a passion, and something to keep me active after retiring from coaching. And we were doing it, of course, my last few years, while I was in coaching, you know, at the Rams and the Chiefs after the Rams. So overall now it's starting to go well, but it's never going to be a thing you can base your estate on, believe me. But we do make good wines, good grades. Our highest grade is 96. I think this year our cab's got, with the 2019's got 94 grades, which is a nice grade for us. Yeah.
Okay, good. So yeah, we kind of want to dig into a little bit of those steps you were taking as you were growing the business. Just to give some background, what kind of education did you have even before coaching? Did you go to school for anything? Or?
No, I didn't. No, I was a physical education, physical education major, okay, because I wanted to be a coach and PE teacher, and a health minor, but no education in wine or grapes or vineyards other than hands-on growing up around the Freddie Annie Vineyard and the Freddie Annie prune orchards. And, in Calistoga at that time, there were 1,800 people in town. And it was I had 29 kids in my graduating class, and half of them were involved in the wine world or prune world or walnut world. It was a farming culture and community. And my dad had an old garage, and he worked on a lot of their cars. So I was always involved with people, and especially Gene Frediani, the Freddie Annie Vineyard. He was like a second dad.
And you said your grandfather was in the wine business, and also your great-grandfather, was that right?
No, my grandfather wasn't in the wine business, Albert Vermeil. No, he just made it as a hobby.
Oh, okay.
And he had learned from Jean-Louis Vermeil, my great-grandfather, who came over from the south of France. He'd learned the process, and he did it. I mean, I can remember getting in the big crusher and standing, and like they make jokes of, with the juice coming up over your feet and everything else. But he would make, I would say he probably made 25, 30 cases, maybe more. I don't remember. I remember they looked like 50-gallon barrels. And there's always a vintage here aging, a new one coming on, and that process for the different things they do in making wine. My great-grandfather owned an 18-acre piece of vineyard and had Calistoga Wine Merchant, I think it was called. It was only a hobby for him. He was extremely successful in San Francisco after coming from Tuscany in Italy, and Napa Valley reminded him of Tuscany, so he started buying properties. At one time, he had over 20 properties up there, including the home that I was born and raised in. But he only lasted a while. Then Prohibition and all that kind of stuff hit, Depression, and he lost most of that.
So this was really a family hobby that you were kind of born into,
Family
exposed
hobby, yeah.
from the very beginning.
Yeah, as a kid, you're sitting there, and my dad would always pour me a glass of wine with half of it was water, and it was always a family conversation. What always really stimulated me is to sit around the table on holidays and discuss the new vintage we're pouring and how my dad talked about it, how my grandfather talked about it, how friends around the table, it's a wine world, and they talk about the different flavors. And I don't have that kind of palate. I know what I like, but I don't have the sophisticated sommelier type palate or training. But that was always stimulating to me. And I thought, and I grew up not looking at wine like I did a can of beer. Can of beer is alcohol. I never thought of wine as being an alcohol. It's just a part of the family meal on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And I still have that same thinking. But it was deeply seated in great memories.
So what was the catalyst, you'd say, that drove you in 1999 to say, let's partner up and start doing this? Was there something that gave you the push to finally...
Well, the catalyst was admiration from my dad, Jean-Louis Vermeil. It's actually pronounced Vermeil. There's a picture right there on the wall of where they came from in the south of France. Next Wednesday, 4 of them from there show up here for 5 days. Okay, so it was my respect and admiration for my dad, and his grandfather's name was Jean-Louis Vermeil. So my great-grandfather. So I said, I'll just perpetuate the name. I'm Richard Vermeil, not Jean-Louis. And it was. So I had friends, and I had the contacts and knew people. And Paul Smith was the winemaker and owner of On the Edge Winery, and he was a winemaker. He was with Mondavi's for 17 years, ran the Opus One program, not as a winemaker, as really the engineer that developed the whole thing and the communication between France and Opus One. So I had all kinds of support. I really did.
Yeah, so people were mostly supportive when you announced you were going to go into winemaking?
Yeah, they were. Yeah, and friends, and they'd say, "What are you going to do that for?" I said, "Well, I just, it's something I've started as a hobby. I enjoy it. I really enjoy giving bottles of wine to friends." When I grew up, people walked in the house, they always walked in with a bottle of wine they made. You exchanged it within the community, and it just left a very positive, warm memory and experience for me at that age. And this way I could reinforce those thoughts,
So as you started partnering into the company and creating the business, did you bring any of your coaching experience into the business world, or what was...
Well, I'm not a business guy, and I have partners that have been extremely successful, entrepreneurs that have made a lot of money. And I knew if we did go into it, they were not going to allow it to fail, and it was never going to be a deal, well, we didn't make any much money this year, we're going to shut it down. They're going to keep it going. And that because of their persistence and their backing, and their home office is in Egg Harbor, New Jersey. And they have a super accountant, GM type guy there that really has taken over for Meal Wine from the business standpoint, from the dollars and dimes and the organizations and the orders and all, and the communication with our tasting room and general manager Andrew Curry in Napa. And they're business guys. What I do is I sell the wine. I can go sell the wine. I can pour the wine in great places and get great positive responses, and even more so today than ever before because of Thomas Brown and Andy Jones' commitment to it. And people drink it. They're surprised at the quality because they expect that's got a football coach's name on it. It's just a hobby. No, it's excellent, excellent wines.
So my question about that is, I know you're passionate about wines. You do the selling of wines as well, but you mentioned these other people who backed you up and didn't let that business fail. So what were those different department heads that you really needed to succeed in this business?
Well, first you always need the people with money. You need the people that aren't going to panic when it isn't going well. You need people that have the ability, vision-wise, to see the potential of it. But see, I'm maybe presenting a little false image in that none of us went in it to make money. None of us wanted to lose money, but we wanted to make good wine, and if we broke even, that would be it. Okay, it's gone beyond that today, but that's the kind of support I had financially. And then their business expertise and people in their company, like Bill Kurtzis and Peter Michaelitis, who work daily on our business in communication with everything that goes on, the buying of barrels, the corks, the bottles, which have become a problem, the bottling dates, all these stuff, the marketing thing. And when we first came out, we sold wine wholesale to different distributors, but to create cash flow. And we gradually, totally moved away from that because it's just limited, small amounts of wine, no volume is almost impossible. You're always going to lose money. And
like
plus, I was the guy
label?
on the road, and you go into a restaurant and sell them 6 bottles of wine because they don't want to be a warehouse for your wines. They'll buy just what they can sell the next 2 weeks and ask you to come back in 2 weeks. Well, I don't live in Kansas City. I don't live in St. Louis. I don't live in Florida. I live right here in Chester County. So we gradually got away from that. We did develop some good customers. Houston became a very good area for us. And in fact, there's a distributor there that still has major steakhouses that pour our Blend 34 as a glass of wine at the bar, and it's very popular there. But that's about the only place we really do it anymore. In fact, you don't even see it in the Pennsylvania state stores anymore. You can't make it break even that way. And the way we're doing it now, you're making limited amounts of wine. You have a wine club now of almost 475. By the end of the year, it'll be over 500 people. You have to have the wines. We ship 3 times a year, a 3-bottle level, a 6-bottle level, a 12-bottle level, and a combination of, and the all Cabernet level, which so we just don't have the wine to go out and sell at wholesale anymore.
Were you guys doing private label originally, like letting other people brand the wine as their own? Or
No. It was always ours. In fact, that picture was the original label. Yeah, that's a blown up snapshot. Actually, not a blown. That's a hand painted picture by a friend in St. Louis when I was coaching at the Rams. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'll show you later the original bottle. But we've invested money in getting good wine guidance. It's so important to talk to people that know more about what you're doing than you do. And now there's things that we know that they don't know because we are the owners and we're deeply emotionally involved. But when you come into a business that you've really never been in, you better be humble enough to know what you don't know, then admit it, and then surround yourself with people that do know. And also make sure they do know what they say they know. And I've always been very lucky in surrounding myself with people that covered my holes within my own knowledge and talents. And I think that's the only way you can succeed.
What's your process to finding those partners who you can not only trust, but know that they're going to...
Number one, at recommendations, I'm not a big interview guy, not even in the coaching world. I'm not smart enough to sit with a guy for 4 hours and figure out he's an expert after 4 hours. But if I know somebody that's worked with somebody and he's worked for them 5 or 6 years, and I trust that guy's opinion, he says, this guy is good, I listen to that. That's a short interview. I've brought guys in and hired them as football coaches and never interviewed them. The first time I met him was when I hired him because of the Bill Walsh said to hire him, because Rod Dowhower said to hire him, because Andy Reid said to hire him, because there's credibility. And Paul Smith had a great reputation in the Napa Valley, and he would ask questions too, but he was involved. He was like a straight A student in both phases of wine culture and vineyards coming out of college in California. That was his education, and we relied on him tremendously. And he eventually moved out of our business because his winery was in his home. And that is sold and gone, and we custom crush now like I said, in Mendingwall Winery in the Silverado Trail between Calistoga and St. Louis. But the big thing is surround yourself with good people, And my fortunate talent has been, I think, I would pick someone that I just had a great feel for as a guy that's got compassion, combined with passion, that I feel good about. And then what his shortcomings are, we cover with somebody else, or he develops them because he wants to work. Hard work's not a form of punishment, guys, And a lot of football players think that. A lot of people do, especially the young kids today. But those kind of people, I don't care what kind of business you're in. If you don't have those kind of people, you're going to struggle.
Good. So, what was your guys' process when you had to come up? I guess there's a lot of regulations in the wine industry.
Oh, yeah.
How did you
Ridiculous.
guys navigate that when you got started? What was your process to?
Well, Bill Curtis, he's actually like our chief operating officer out of Egg Harbor for John Scarpel and Michael Z's company. He'd call, communicate, talk with people, talk with states. Every state has a different rule. Some of them are ridiculous. State of Pennsylvania, they've eased the rules now. When we first were in business, we couldn't ship here. Now we ship direct to your home, which is why we now have about 135 club members and some real solid Cabernet drinkers, But the regulations, of course, a company like I'm involved with outside the wine world that's backing this, they have lawyers. And they know who to go to, and they're not maybe in the viticulture world, but they'll know who to talk to. And we learned eventually as we gain experience. It's been 15 years now, since 2008, almost 15 years, that we know who to talk to. We know who to call. I call Thomas Brown. I call Andy Jones. We call Mendingwall Winery. We call brokers. We call these different people, and get answers. But now it's not a problem for us really that much anymore because, like for example, I could sell a ton of wine in Delaware, but we're not licensed to go into Delaware. And so you don't bother. And we don't need them. I'd like to have them because I have friends there. The state is the United States is so inconsistent with the liquor rules. For example, I'm going in the Hall of Fame in August. We're going to pour Vermeil wines at our party post enshrinement ceremony, okay? But there's processes to go through to make it legal.
Even
these
just
guys,
to do that.
Yeah, just to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how does the licensing work in each state? Is that something you have to apply for, purchase?
Yes.
Or?
Oh, yeah. You go through it. There's a legal process in every state. Okay. California is the easiest. Okay, but they have their process, but it's not restrictive. Pennsylvania's restrictive. Though Pennsylvania is one of the largest buyers of wine in the United States. I sell a lot of wine, but it's different, because this state liquor control board. You sell a bottle of wine as a wine company, it goes to the state store. The state comes in, brings to the state, then it goes to the state store. So there's process of the amount of costs keep going up every level, and pretty quick you're asking too much for your wine. It shouldn't be at that level, Mm-hmm. So there's process. There are other states it's almost impossible. And I don't understand. They're legalizing marijuana in different states. I don't understand it, other than that, the state makes a lot of money if they control it.
Have you guys had a strategy of which states you want to go after for sales? Or?
We initially did, yes, definitely. Yeah, you had to, based on their restrictions and their legal process. Some states it's much easier than others, and it was easier to get distributors because they're not confined to strict restrictions. And so we did that. Yeah, we were in and out of different states, and Total Wines I think has a little bit of our wine in most of their stores, maybe 2 cases. Don't sell a lot to them, but they like to carry it because people once in a while ask for it.
Which states are the most restrictive?
I would say the Northeast up on top of the country up there is tough. Philadelphia is tough. Utah is tough. Delaware is stricter. These kind of places, and I'm not really up to date on that, and I've sort of faded out of that business and moved more strictly to, like, I have 3 major engagements coming up this fall that I'll sell a ton of wine in major high-end country clubs. I'll go in and pour it with a couple of our employees. Will come in with us and we'll pour our wines, and they'll buy our wines. They will join our wine club, and we've had some very successful events. We know where our market is. People that are used to buying quality wines and like to have some in their home and like to be in a club that get the shipment and like to order for gifts. PNC Bank right here has used us to give Christmas presents. WIP has through PNC, a big football event. They'll buy some wines and I'll sign the bottles and give them to them. Been very big advocates for us, so we appreciate that.
So for when you guys started out, did you guys have in mind the different types of wine you wanted to make?
Yes.
Or how did you guys come up with that list?
Well, I was Cabernet. I was hard-headed. I wanted 100% Cabernet. Some of the greatest French wines are not 100% Cabernet. We make 3 Cabernets now. Jean-Louis Vermeil Cabernet, which is our original basis of our business, is 21% Cabernet Franc. It's a great glass of wine. The other 2, Pickett Road and Rosedale Block, named after the roads they're on in the Napa Valley, are very high-end quality grapes. They're $150 a bottle, but we only make 125 cases or so. We buy the grapes by the row. So one year those 6 rows produce more tonnage, so you make more wine. The next year they don't. For example, our Sauvignon Blanc last year was off about 55%. We made 95 cases rather than 200. So it varies from year to year. But
what caused that? Why did it produce so much less?
When you ask any vineyard management guy what causes this to happen, they give you so many answers you almost lose the question. There's no one single thing. Sometimes there is. Hey, we lost all our 2020 red grapes because of forest fire smoke. Not the flames. They didn't burn the vines. The smoke engulfed the berries at the bad time when they're about to be picked in the fall, ruined them. We have no 2020 red wine.
So that flavor would get into the grapes
Oh,
and
yeah.
just make it.
And the problem
nasty.
in our contracts, if we picked it, we paid for it. Now, we picked the Zinfandel, and we picked the Petit Syrah, thinking it was good. And you don't find out it's tainted until you get into the 3rd stage of the process of making it. All of a sudden, it's no good, so you pour it out. $50,000 worth of grapes out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's not a lot of fun. See, and up there, we've had forest fire problems twice. We've had earthquake, a major earthquake. We've had flooding. We've had high heat and drought. We've had every extreme that could cause us to fail. But due to the tenacity and the support of my partners, we kept it going in the tough times. Now the tasting room was doing well, and the club is doing well, but we went through adversity. And if you don't handle adversity well, then don't get in the business world.
Now, how do you hedge against those environmental?
Well, we do as a company because of the financial strength of my partners, not because of me. I'm a 15% owner, okay. And the farmer, for example, the Freddie Annie Vineyard, is over 100 years old. Mrs. Freddie Annie was my babysitter, and I was born 85 years ago. I've been involved with that vineyard all my life, okay. They self-insure. What they do is every year, part of their crop, the income from that crop goes over here in storage. in the bank. It sits there and do whatever they do with it, business standpoint. So if there is a bad year and they still have to do all these other things, they can cover it. There are people that pay forest fire insurance, all that kind of stuff. The Frediani's vineyard was self-insured.
And you guys aren't obligated to buy the grapes even
No.
if there's a weather
If we
incident?
pick them, we own them. If we don't pick them, they own them.
So is there like a down payment you put to hold the row? Because I guess you could buy all of them and then just...
No, we're on an evergreen. It rotates every year. It's always like 3 years in front of us. And you have to give notification as to, we plan to quit making Petit Syrah, or, geez, we're gonna not make Zinfandel. Let's just use it and say, yeah, if you can sell that to someone else, we won't buy it. And because the 4 kids run it, one of them's going to be at my Hall of Fame induction. Okay, so we have a relationship, which is so important in the business world. Relationships. So you can get things done that aren't contrary to the philosophy of either side of the business.
So the vineyards are more of a partner than just a vendor.
Oh yeah, they're a family partner, really. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, good. So how is your original of just making Cabernet? When did you guys decide to shift and expand the...
Well, that's when the partners got in and bought him out, because he had Zinfandel in the barrels, Cabernet Franc in the barrels, and all that, and that was all going to become Vermeil wine products. So there they were, and we were able to sell them. The Zinfandel vineyards was planted in 1908, original vineyard, still picking. Now, it doesn't produce quite as much as it used to, but it still makes great Zinfandel. So you had these things, Petit Syrah, these kinds. There's no Merlot that we would pick at that time. They didn't have Sauvignon Blanc. So Mrs. Frediani planted 5 acres of it for us, and we took part of it. And then in 3 to 4 years, we're picking it, And our Chardonnay comes from Dutton Ranch in Sonoma County, very, very high-end Chardonnay vineyard company over there. Wonderful place, and we make a couple hundred cases of Chardonnay over there because people come in our tasting room and they'd like some Chardonnay. If you don't have it, then they don't come in, and if they don't come in, they don't try the other wines as well.
Right. So your expansion was kind of due to demand.
Yeah, people ask for it, and the access to the grapes right there in the Frediani vineyard. Yeah.
And does each wine come from a different variety of grape? Is that how?
Oh yeah. The blend, our 34, which is a blend, 34 Roman numeral for Super Bowl 34. It is a Cabernet Franc Petit Syrah. It used to have a little Zinfandel in it. And the percentage of each grape varies from year to year. So you have to trust your winemakers. It's a $56 bottle of wine. It's actually costing us more to make it than we should charge more for it, because of the price of Cabernet Franc that goes in it now is the same price as Cabernet. So, and that's, $10,000 a ton, so, and more. So, yeah. But anyway, it all works together, and it works a lot smoother once you get it running.
Right.
It's like you keep tuning up your engine. You keep tuning up your engines. You keep correct your mistakes. In coaching, I always told me, and I told my coaching staff, yes, we're going to have another season next year. The number one person we have to improve is ourselves. Then we can improve our players. Then we can improve our product. Then we can improve our process. And winemaking at the high-end level is very, very sensitive. Trying to achieve high 95 grades in that, you can lose grading points in the transportation or the time it takes from when they're picked to when do they get to the crush. And sometimes 2 hours makes a difference. So you've got to know what you're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. Football, I think I know what I'm doing. The wine world, I listen and learn, and I know a lot more now. But and there are times I don't agree, but I never contradict those that do.
So in that spirit of improvement, was there any specific area that you felt from the beginning that really needed to be improved, and then you've seen that improvement over time?
You spread the improvement philosophy into the mind of everybody that works for you. If you want to get better, I was never the best, but I always tried to get better. And if you can implant that in the people you're working with, if they come to work and they like where they're working, the atmosphere in the building is good, the relationships with each other are good, and they buy into, no matter how good we've been, we can get better if we do this a little better, or change this, or get some new equipment, or take a little different approach, or learn from the winery next door. There's a lot of information shared in the Napa Valley when you're connected like we are with Thomas Brown and Andy Jones. Yeah.
That's that company culture idea.
Oh yeah, yeah. When you go into and you can go into a store out here in our Chester County and walk in, and you can feel if the atmosphere is positive, and you can feel if the atmosphere is negative. It doesn't take you long. It doesn't. Okay, I'm a so-called celebrity. When I go into a grocery store with Carol says, "Geez, you should come with me all the time. They treat me so much better when you come with me." And my thought is, we treat everybody as if they're a so-called celebrity. Yeah. The dollar is the same. Yeah.
Good. So, what is your guys' process for quality control to make sure that you guys are putting out not just high-rated wine, but something that you're proud of as?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. You get in trouble chasing grades. Okay, we don't chase grades. We appreciate them when we get good grades. But our wine, you trust your winemaker and his palate. See, I have watched the blending of wines cover a table like we're sitting at with white sheet paper with test tube standards. And actually, they claim in blending wines that by the percentage of blend in a test tube, they can transfer that same taste to a 50-gallon barrel. It's a little hard for me to believe sometimes, but they do it because these guys are chemists. The good winemakers they're very intelligent people, and they're chemists, and they know what they're doing, and you rely on those kind of people and their taste thoughts. But like I said, I know what I like, but I'm not a wine snob. I bought a $25 bottle of wine, thought it was excellent, and I bought a $150 bottle of wine, and they were very good. If it tastes good to you, it's good wine. But we've gotten to a point now we can pour our wines to people that are sophisticated, that have a wine cellar full of high-end quality Napa Valley wines, and really like our wines as well, that sort of says we're there in the ballpark.
So, when did you meet your winemakers?
Well, Paul Smith, I've known for, because the original partner with On the Edge Winery, he married into the Freddie Annie family. His ex-wife is coming to the Hall of Fame, Mr. Freddie Annie. So I know. I would her babysitter. Okay. So I've known her all my life. Her husband I met after they got married, and then they were in their early 20s. So that's ever. But he's been out of our business now since I'd say 2014, somewhere out. He moved on. And,
So, when you found his replacement, what was that process of finding someone?
well, I recruited him. I researched who has the best reputation. This one fellow Thomas Brown lives in Calistoga, my hometown, and he lived just a few blocks from where our Calistoga tasting room was at that time. We no longer own it. We sold it. And I recruited him as a consultant when Paul Smith was making our wine, and Paul was all for it too because he wouldn't come. Then when Paul Smith left, he came as our consultant and brought his winemaker that he works with a lot, Andy Jones, with us. And at that time, we were making it at Tampa Bay Winery. Originally, we were making it at the old Cuvasson Winery, so this is the third spot. But Thomas Brown owns a percentage of the Mendingwall Winery. His own label is Thomas Brown's own label is Rivers Marie, which is very hard to get.
So, was there a process of kind of teaching him what your guys' standards were, or is it just
No,
handing
he
him the
taught us
keys?
what his standards were.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a difference between delegation and designation. Okay, we designated him. Okay,
So
to do
recognize
this.
his
Yeah,
expertise.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. Sometimes a little knowledge is harmful.
Oh, because you start trying to control things.
Well, you
that
think you know
maybe-
more than you really do, and you don't.
Right.
Yeah. There's no substitute for wisdom. You can hire it. It takes a long time for you to learn it. Yeah.
Right. That's smart. Yeah, we've had a handful of interviews we've done recently, and that seems to be a common theme with successful people is that find experts to partner with and let them be the expert. Don't try to micromanage
Yeah.
everyone's decision.
And learn from them, and then gain their respect. So when you ask a question, they give you an answer that satisfies, and they aren't afraid to say, you just can't do it that way, either because you don't know enough about it. Yeah.
So you said 2008 's when you officially kind of like started running it like a business.
Yeah.
What did you guys change that took it from more of a hobby to actual business? What was
My involvement in travel. I was on the road a lot, 2 days, 3 days in Houston, 2 days in Kansas City, 2 days in St. Louis. I'd go to St. Louis and sell 50 cases. We had major brands distributorship in St. Louis and Kansas City, and then later, since then, Glaciers have bought them out. I think it was that, if I remember right. But anyway, that's what we did, and made contact with the Landry restaurant chain and these kind of things. But the restaurant business for little guys like us is really almost impossible. Yeah.
And what was your sales process when you're going on the road?
Well, yeah, I would travel. We had a full-time employee that was doing it all the time, and I would travel. He would set up the meetings and organizations, and I would fly in to meet him, either in Kansas City, St. Louis, Florida. I mean, we've been in different states. And I meet with him. He'd have it all organized. Tom Ward was his name, and we ended up giving him 1% of the business because he did a good job for us. And just let him take me where I had to go. I didn't go in cold. I didn't have that kind of time.
And who were you meeting with? What kind of people?
With distributors. We're pouring wine for distributors, and the distributor, I developed a great relationship. I keep going back to Houston from a friend at a speaking engagement. Okay, I was speaking at Puerto Rico or somewhere, and this guy was honored. Lincoln Financial Salesman of the Year, had been that many times in Houston. So I met him at this speaking engagement. I forget where we were, some island. And he said, I understand you're in wines. I said, yeah, it's a hobby. I'm not like a lot. He said, well, I might have the largest French collection of wine in the United States. I got about 15,000 bottles.
Wow.
He says, in fact, I travel with my own wine. Would you like to taste some? I said, oh, give me your room number. So we developed a relationship in 3 days at this convention. And he says, you ought to come to Houston. My number one client is Specs in Houston. And the owner of that company, the daughter and the owner of that company, are personal friends. I manage your estate planning and all that. So he said, I'll introduce you. Well, a week later, I'm there. So I get involved with Specs, and they assign me a salesman to work with, Rodney Brown, rather. Yeah, and we developed a relationship for 6-7 years. I went in there 4 or 5 times a year in the off seasons and sell wines, and he'd have it all organized. And we were in a lot of major, president's country clubs and all these kind of different things. Wine loves Houston. Okay, Houston's a good wine city. A lot of steakhouses, a lot of people drink wine there, and Specs happened to be when I got involved with them, they had about 90 stores, and all of a sudden they're at like 190 today around the state. But again, we have moved away from that business because we just don't make enough wine to sell at wholesale, then not have enough to sell retail. You just can't meet expenses.
So now you're kind of more going for the yearly subscription type almost? Right?
Yearly subscription and hands-on direct sales, personal. Some online people, I'll do a speaking engagement and say, geez, if you like Vermeil wine, just Google Vermeil wines. We'll get some responses. And I'll set up wine tasting events for, like I said, there's a couple coming into tasting room in Napa today. There's another one coming in from this area. Whenever I do anything public, I always say, geez, if you'd like to visit my tasting room, call me. I give them my cell phone number. They call me. Hey, Coach, we're going to the Napa Valley. I'll set up a tasting for them on me, and invariably we'll end up with wine club members. Yeah. When people get in the wine world, they like wine more than they do when they're home drinking it. The whole atmosphere turns them on, and they've already had 3 stops. Okay. Yeah.
So have you, with other winemakers out there, like how have you guys, I don't want to call them competition. How do you guys view your other winemakers out there?
With great respect. With the Frediani Vineyard, I'm out there for almost a month in the fall. What I do is drive tractor. Then I go with the grandson who delivers wines to the great wineries. delivers grapes rather, because 170 acres, yeah, they're producing over 300 tons of grapes. Well, we maybe get 30 tons. So I go with them. I meet people from Camis's to Stag's Leap to all these different wineries, and I meet people. And because I have a Vermeil name that's born and raised in that valley, it's a football name, and many of them want to talk football. So you develop a little relationship with people in that way. But really, wine spectator, yeah, and I spend like 3 to 4 days a year just in wine meetings out there, discuss what other people are doing and what we can do better. And we always listen to the Thomas Brown and the Andy Jones, and before we do anything, it goes across their evaluation process. It's in front of them, and we get the opinion. And we don't need a lecture. All we need is some advice, and what do you think? And they'll tell us. But
it sounds like in hearing you talk, it sounds like whenever there's an opportunity, you really kind of seize on it, jump on it.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you have any, how do you evaluate what opportunities that you should jump on and which ones you should let go?
Well, for example, I got 3 coming up in New York. We did one at New Rochelle last year. Home run. People love the wine. The country club, Robert Cassera is the general manager, and he's sort of the president of the general managers club. And he said, my God, the people love the wines. And we'd signed 12 club members and sold $58,000 worth of wine. They like the wine. And I'm sure we'll go back there. But he sets us up other places in. The recommendation is good. But these people are used to drinking good wine. So, and I don't think we'll ever get to the point where a person who is a sophisticated wine drinker can't afford it. We're not in the Harlan or the Bryant family or the Colgin and those high end, Screaming Eagle, and they're way up there. But we can compete quality-wise, and now the good thing for us, people know it. We have winemakers that stop in our tasting room. I've been there when they did it, and they have gone up 15 different tasting rooms, said, Coach, this is the best wine on the block. And they're making wine too. So I know we're doing it right.
What was your guys' process to break into that circle of fine wine versus just another wine?
Well, it's a pride thing. I had no rules when I grew up in Calistoga. My only rule is never embarrass your Vermeil family name. So anything I ever tried to put my name on, I wanted it done right. Because if I can't take pride in it, I'm not going to do it. And yes, I could drink cheap wine, and I'm not a snob or anything like that, but if I was going to put the Vermeil name on a wine label, I wanted it to represent integrity, quality, a passion for the business and a compassion for the people that drink it. I've met so many wonderful people because I like wine. It's amazing. I mean, it's just been. When I go to St. Louis, I'm within there a few days, and all of a sudden I got cases of wine delivered to the office. Same thing, Kansas City. They know I'm a wine guy, and all of a sudden, someone who's big in wine, I met Don Bryant Family Vineyards. $500 a bottle of that stuff is today. Okay, they're really the father of the 100-point Cabernets in the Napa Valley. He lived in St. Louis. Football fan. All of a sudden, I'm drinking bottles of wine with him. So you grew it that way. And but I think, for example, we're going to make a $250 bottle of wine celebrating this Hall of Fame event coming up. And it's going to cost us a fortune to do it because we're getting the grapes from Beckstoffer Vineyard. We can't get any more grapes from Freddie Annie. This is coming from Beckstoffer, which their overall vineyard complex in Napa Valley is probably the #1 vineyard in the Napa Valley. And they make wines for people and sell grapes to people that are making very, very expensive wines. But it's very expensive to get the grapes. So we're going to make a couple hundred cases and try it and sell it as a memento of the Hall of Fame and as a memorabilia piece. And then if it's successful, then we'll continue to make it probably under a label that we used a while back called Integrity, which we had a blend called Integrity. We quit making it because it was a high-end blend, and we were making too much. and so we were falling back in the sales. And we could do it today because now we need it, but at that time we were making too much wine with that included, and so we've got too much on the shelves, and we're making another vintage, so the expenses started catching up with us. So we backed it off. But we could now, with the volume of wine we're selling, we could name a very expensive bottle of wine and use that integrity label, which we already own. See?
So what is it that drives up the price of those high cost wines?
Number one, the grapes. That's number one. Let's say if you pay $10,000 a ton for the grape, the starting price for that bottle of wine is $100 a bottle. That's just the starting price. Now, for people like us that don't own the vineyard and don't own the winery, and you're not the winemaker, so it adds on to it. You can spend it up to $35,000 to $40,000 a ton. It's automatically, you can, but there's not a lot of it. But if you want it, you can get it. But most of that is all spoken for now with the high-end label, the very, very high-end.
And why are some grapes so much more expensive than others?
Soil, yeah. For example, I talked about Pickett Road Cabernet. It's a 94 grade this year, as is Rosedale. 2 football part. I use a football cliche. 2 football fields apart, but the soil's different. In France, they go from row to row, But the soil structure with the terroir, the rock structure, the different minerals within that area, the access to a little bit more water, deep down in where the roots get, make a difference. Make a difference. The other thing is the handling, the vintner, the guy that handles the grapes vines on a daily basis. They treat those things like they're Rolex watches. The guys that really are making the wine. I mean, it's amazing. It's so much more sophisticated than the day I was working in the vineyards and picking grapes as a kid. The only vineyard left at that is the Zinfandel vineyard, where it's not up on stakes, on T-vines and this kind of stuff. And you have to crawl underneath the big vines to pick the grapes. You can't drive the tractor down because the vines overlap. So you got to pick them, put them on your head, 45-pound box of grapes, and run and dump them into the bin pulled by the tractor. In the modern vineyards, you drive right down in between them. Pickers are right beside you. Drop them in. And, they'll pick 2 tons of grape in 25 minutes by hand. But the old one, you don't. The advantage of that, we know what the advantage is of that, the old days? Heat. Napa Valley gets very hot, doesn't hurt those grapes because they have their own umbrella.
Oh, okay.
They have their own shade provided for them.
Yeah.
But when you put them out on T-vines and the stakes and that kind of stuff, then you have heat problems. It can be 105, 106. It's all right if it's a day, but if it's 8 days in a row, you're in trouble. They'll burn just like raisins. Yeah.
So when you're talking about something like the Hall of Fame, it's obviously not just a new label. It's actually really high quality grapes that are going into it to justify that price tag.
Costing a fortune. But see, right now, we can afford to take that kind of hit because we have money in the bank. 4 years ago, we couldn't do that. You unless our partners could do it, just take it out of their pocket and do it, But we really didn't approach the business that way that much. But now we can afford to go ahead and experiment with a higher bottle because of the prestige of the Hall of Fame. And we're in the process, I should hear today, with all right to use the Hall of Fame logo just as a little part of the label. Yeah,
that'll be really cool. So is there like an industry standard profit margin you mark up, like your costs to get to that, or how do you guys do pricing?
Again, it starts with the price of the grape, as I've already said, and then it goes from there. Your expenses and everything else. And one of the things that's happened in the Napa Valley, there are people, and it's not a negative because it enhances the valley and the quality, is, for example, I have a very, very good friend that lives right around the corner. He owned an unbelievable winery and home and vineyard he built himself in Napa Valley. He sold it. Who bought it? 2 executives from Apple. These people with a lot of money come in and buy it. This is how they want to retire. And they're not as yes, they don't want to lose money, but their life doesn't revolve around the income of that business. Mm-hmm. So that, what happens too, it also happens is all of a sudden they start they need employees. Employees are getting tough, you know. Grandfathers, I have grandfathers that ride on my tractor, the bins I'm pulling to sort the leaves, and their sons pick the grapes and pour them in there, but the grandsons aren't doing it. They don't want to do it anymore. They graduated from Calistoga High School, and they're maybe going on to college. They're doing, it's things like that are starting to appear. I think all over the country, not just in the wine industry.
Why do you think that is?
Well, you know, kids don't want to work like they used to work. Just drive around here and see the number of signs in the window looking for help. For the, you know, the everyday hard work, and it's getting harder for the Mexican, the Hispanic to get into the valley. And the Freddie Annie Vineyard, for example, has 3 families that have been with them like 35, 40 years. They provide them housing and everything, and kids grow up in there. But the young kids aren't too excited about doing that. If you have 4 kids, maybe only one of them really wants to do that. Yeah. And there are families that started like that I went to high school with, okay, graduating in 1954. They came to the valley as migrant workers. They own their own winery. They own their own winery and vineyards today. You know, so there's possibilities there, but you got to work.
So what was your guys' process to get into that high-end clientele base to sell the more expensive wine?
The process is simple. It all depends on the grape you pick, number one, and the guy who manages that vineyard, and then the winemaker and his process. If you don't have the right team, I don't care what business you're in, especially in the high-end quality wine, you can't charge somebody $200 a bottle of wine. It tastes like a $50 bottle of wine. To the expert, most people can't differentiate. I've poured $700 bottle of wine that was given to me and tasted against our wine, and I don't have the palate to distinguish. I know it's excellent. And I can't tell you it isn't slightly better than ours, but I don't have that distinguishing talent. Not many people do. There aren't many sommeliers who can really. But it's the process of skilled people that take pride in what they're doing, like to be on a winning team. They like to share the positive experiences, and they do a great job of handling the negative experiences, because you're going to have them.
So someone who's buying a couple $100 bottle of wine, they probably understand what's inside of it. And
oh yeah,
why
some people do. Some people buy it because it enhances their own ego, or image, or they're trying to impress somebody, and they can afford it. You know, $200 isn't a lot of money to some people. You know, they aren't working by the hour. You know, but you go to a restaurant now. I tried to go to bring your own wine restaurants, or pay a corkage, because I have so much wine stored over the years. And before I really got deep into the business, I was collecting wines, so I had too much wine, and so I drink more of somebody else's wine than I do my own. And a high percentage of wine I ever get in this house goes out to charities. They eat you alive. They just, everybody wants to give wine away as a charity thing. You know?
As like a fundraiser?
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of fundraising, speaking events?
Yeah. Quite a bit. I've narrowed it down. I had the Vermeil Charity Boy Scout tournament in Chester County for 27 years. We made a lot of money over the years. And the COVID hit, going on 28. We had it all organized to go, so we had to cancel it. And then during that cancellation period, I started hearing from all the guys that support it, the celebrities. They're glad it's over, because some of them can't. They're my age, and players in the Philadelphia area. They're in their early 70s, late 60s, and they don't play golf anymore because their bodies hurt. So they were almost relieved they didn't feel the obligation to support me. And I sort of get tired of asking people for money. My name has been involved with so many things, and I believe now I'm more into helping. For example, we have a special needs granddaughter. Help with that CHOP, help in the Cool Cars for Kids event, Born Leaf summer camp for special needs kids, and these kind of things, and direct what I give and direct what I help raise in that effort. Otherwise, there is no such thing as a bad charity. It's just one after another. And I'm not negative about them. I just can't service them all.
Right.
So you mentioned the pandemic. I know right now there's a lot of supply chain stuff. You mentioned that too.
Yeah, problem.
What's going on in the business with supply chain, and how are you guys dealing with it?
Well, last year we bottled our Sauvignon Blanc in heavy Cabernet bottles. Couldn't get the lightweight ones. Sauvignon Blanc was ready to go in a year, but we couldn't get them. So all of a sudden you pick up a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc and holy mackerel, what's in there? But couldn't get them. And the prices keep going up, with these kinds of things on everything.
That
The
extra
shipping,
weight, yeah, probably
the
adds
shipping.
to shipping
Oh,
costs.
yeah. And, now we're shipping to 475 different addresses. Expenses go up. And I understand that. Everybody is feeling that today. Yeah. It makes it difficult to hold your price. I am probably the most negative guy within our business in regard to raising prices. Because, see, I never went in to make money. And I want people that really enjoy wine to still be able to buy it. I don't want to price it out of their level because they are the reason we're successful today. I don't want to keep pricing it above where they can't buy it anymore. Mm-hmm. But the expenses, fortunately for my guys, I've said this a few times, fortunately for me, my guys are very successful in other business worlds, certainly, and they carried the load when we weren't breaking even for a long time.
Excuse me. So, do you guys have any long-term goals looking into the future for
Yeah.
Vermeil Wine? What
I do. I'm 85 years old, and the only thing we really own is the label, Vermeil label. We own that. We don't own the tasting room. We lease it. The room we owned in Calistoga, we sold. So I would like to make sure that at least my percentage gets in the hands of someone that respects what we have done and will continue to grow the quality of the wine. Maybe not make any more. About 80% of the wineries in Napa Valley are 10,000 cases or less, and family owned. It's the big one. But to try to keep it, so it, what's the term? Perpetuates itself. And you need the right people to do that. Because my partner's, he just celebrated his 80th birthday. Okay. Yeah, so I'd like to have that. I've talked to some specific people about it. My kids aren't interested. Yeah, we could sell if I lived out there, we would have to find a way to double what we make in a year. Because when I'm there, I can sell wine. And it's because you're hands-on, you're face-to-face with people, you're pouring it for them, and you're visiting them, and you're at the event. But when you're this far away, it's more difficult. That's why I have a little Zoom. I have 3 Zoom things set up coming up here in August for Rico Corporation, okay? And I pour the wines, taste it, and invariably we'll end up some wine club members. They buy the wine we're drinking, they're drinking, and I'm opening mine downstairs, and we do a Zoom. It's been very successful for us. And it touches a lot of people. I've done it for PNC Bank for loads of people. Yeah.
So, no in the family succession plans for the business?
I don't see it. If I died tomorrow, the kids would own the 15%. But I've talked to both of them about wanting to move out there and really get deeply involved, and they have their own lives. Yeah, it'd be nice, but I've had a plan, and I have a person picked out, and I haven't convinced him to do it yet. But anyway, we'll see.
Good. Well, to close, I just wanted to ask if you had advice you wanted to share with entrepreneurs or people who are thinking of starting a business. What would be your advice to someone who's looking to start in the business world, in wine or anything really?
Well, I think first off, what you have to do is invest in your people, and because they're the ones that are going to develop your product. There's so many people in the business world that are so worried about their product that pretty quick they can't maintain the level that they had it once achieved because the people grind down. And I just think you've got to have people that are emotionally involved in your process and your product, and that they feel a little bit of the ownership themselves, and that you treat them, like the old expression, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. But people have an unbelievable tolerance for appreciation, and you've got to make sure, yes, your product, they're all doing it, but it's people for the most part. Now, technology's entered, but someone still runs the technology. Someone still thinks ahead of that. Someone interprets things, and but some people just have a great feel for things too. Just like quarterbacks. They can all look like they can throw the ball 75 yards downfield, but they all can't play well Sunday. Same thing when you're putting a team together in any kind of business.
Okay. So how can people learn more about Vermeil Wines, and you guys have anything going on this year you want to talk about?
Just Google Vermeil Wines. Just Google Vermeil Wines, and it's simple. You can go on there. They got a bunch of stuff on there. You can see what we sell and what's going on. And the tasting room is very nice. We get a lot of compliments in our tasting room. And we get a lot of Pennsylvania people that go in there. And when we started on 1018 First Street in Napa, there were only a few tasting rooms. Now there's, maybe over a dozen of them right there in the area. And so, and we send people their tasting rooms, and they send them to our tasting rooms. But we have, you mentioned competition. We have no problem pouring our wines against anybody else's wines, and I don't tell them it's better. That's for them to determine if they like it better. Yeah. First off, if I'm sitting there and I'm pouring the wine, even if they don't like it, they'll tell you they like it. Okay, they don't want to embarrass you or hurt your feelings or anything. But what I like is when I get a note from somebody, geez, I stopped in the Napa tasting room. Gosh, your wines are really good and good, Coach. Keep it going. And I get those emails and notes and that kind of thing. And that's what I love. That it's not influenced by it's not influenced by relationship. It's influenced by their taste buds and their appreciation for quality.
Nice.
Okay. Well, Coach, thank you so much for your time and allowing us to come into your house and
All right.
speak with you today.
Yeah,
Love
thank
talking
you.
about wine business.
Okay.
Take
All right,
care.
Take care.
Stories from the Top is your guide to successful business development. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or find Edge of Cinema on YouTube. Stories from the Top is an Edge of Cinema production, hosted by Matthew Skura and Jeremy Schmidt. To learn more or get in touch, visit edgeofcinema.com/podcast.